Welcome to another episode of the Strong Family Project podcast. I'm Joe, joined again by Mel. We have a special edition episode for you today where we'll be responding to some common parenting thoughts that we found in an article online.
Welcome back to the Strong Family Project podcast, where we guide you on the path to raising confident, independent, and resilient children in a strong family environment.
Since we've been running the Strong Family Project podcast for you in the strongfamilyproject.com website where we give you the path, since we've been working on all that stuff, our phones listen to us and recommend many more parenting articles. And sometimes the clickbaity headlines get me and I click on them and I'm wondering what people are talking about these days. I came across one that I thought would be excellent for us to chat on. The title of the article is People Are Sharing the Parenting Trends That Absolutely Need to End Now. Sounds pretty harsh.
It does.
So these are 21 of these responses to this question on what parenting trends need to end. And I haven't shared them with Mel. I skimmed it quickly. So it's going to be a live reaction to what our thoughts are on what some of these common, this is from Upworthy, what these common thoughts are out there. And in my initial scroll through, I think some of them are probably things that need to be paid attention to, and some of them are overstated marketing, which is important for us to talk about with you, because there's always this push for one thing, and then there'll be a counter marketing argument against it. I'll give you an example. Morning routines are huge. They're huge in our family, huge for in the business world. They'll write so many articles about good morning routines that they probably went too far, where they're like, all right, I wake up and for this 5 minutes I meditate, for this 7 minutes I'm in a cold bath, for these 6 minutes I read, then I do this. And now they're getting mocked a little bit by saying, oh, just wake up and get to work. Truth is probably somewhere in between those extremes. And so we want to put some words to that. Get my beverage, big beverage guy. Mel's got some kombucha. I got some coffee, some water. I have my pile of hats here because we record these. Not to tell you all the secrets, we record these all on the same day, and I just switch hats. So it looks like on YouTube that I'm not wearing the same thing.
Give away our secrets
every time. So that's my hat trick. All right. So as we get into these, this is a quick reminder. If you find this valuable and you appreciate our opinion and feedback and the content we share, do visit strongfamilyproject.com. Get on the email list by downloading the path. It's all free. And if you enjoy the podcast, swing over and give it a rating and review. All right, so we have 21 of the most popular responses to the parenting question of things that absolutely need to stop right meow. Number 1, pretending that not parenting is parenting. I won't tell my child to stop kicking your leg repeatedly because I don't want to crush his spirit. This person wrote sarcastically underneath this comment. This person's called the Stoic Donkey. You can tell.
I'll try to
you really got
take
to
that.
put some thought into these screen names. All right, pretending that not parenting is parenting. Mel, what are your thoughts?
That doesn't make any sense to me. So I would think that would have to go. And not parenting. Kids certainly have to have some level of the ability to make decisions for themselves, but they need to first be guided on how to make decisions for themselves.
I think the Stoic Donkey is saying it with a little bit of sarcasm. And I get the concept that they're trying to say here, which is don't let your kids run wild and then just say you're doing that because it's for the kids' benefit. That's really just not parenting.
Oh, so you mean like it's an excuse?
Correct.
Basically for not doing anything. I think probably a trend that will happen with all of these is we are not, a lot of people I think just say let kids be kids, which to a degree I understand. They're very creative. When they're bored, they can really create cool things to do, and a lot of interesting, even problem-solving ideas come from our kids. But to think that to forget that we're raising a child who's going to be an adult, I think sometimes that gets put to the wayside. Like we have to consider their future. They're not going to wake up one day when they're 18 or 21 or whatever people think adulting is and just know how to be adults.
I think it's very weird that we'll take concepts and apply it to families that would work nowhere else in the world and just assume it would work for kids. I think we're doing a disservice to kids. I'll give you an analogy. Imagine if the child. Imagine if you joined a sports team and they just said, all right, I'm not going to coach you, just do what you want so you feel good about what you do. You would get creamed at everything you do and be not successful. Imagine if you joined a workplace and they said, all right, just sit at this desk and be you. Do your stuff. Like, how long would you be at that job? Your coworkers would run laps around you because they're not investing in your education. They're not teaching you the things you need to be successful. But then we do it with parents. We get all, oh, let's feel good about this and just let the kids do what they want. So I agree in most cases. This is a parenting trend that I think would need to stop. What do you think?
I would agree. I think something we've been talking a lot on our walks lately has been about how people might not, they are educated on how to do a job. You go to school, you have certain goals and you achieve them, but we're not necessarily educated on how to parent. You just rely on what you had, which could have been great, could have been not great. And I think people enter parenting without really having an instruction manual, so to speak. And that's what this reminds me of. Just do whatever.
And I don't think we'll go too far into all of these like we're spending on this first one. I would add the caveat, time and place. Like, if the kids are out the doors playing, let them be kids and explore within reason so they're not damaging themselves or others. They also need to know when you're out in public, you can't interfere in other people's enjoyment of that public space by having kids that are jerks. And so I think that is the line. I'm saying harshly, but if you're out in a public space, you have to be aware that there are other people that are out to enjoy that space as well. And if you let your kids run wild and it affects the other person's enjoyment or safety, or if your kids running up booting people's shopping carts at the store, you got to stop pretending that's parenting, letting them do what they want.
This is a buzzword, but boundaries are really important. So boundaries at home clearly can be different than boundaries when you're in public, but they still need to be set and role modeled.
Number 2.
Okay.
You're going to have to agree or disagree with this. Does this need to stop? Denying your kid any negative experiences or emotions. They are a normal part of being a person. Teach them to handle negative emotions now before you send them out to a world where they are not prepared to handle.
I feel like you said two different things. I want my kids to experience.
You're really going to struggle with this because it's agree or disagree. Okay. So here's what parents do. They deny their kids negative emotions.
Right. Disagree.
Okay. Explain why.
Okay. It said it in there. I want my kids to learn to be emotionally intelligent. I want them to learn that they're going to have feelings and they have to manage them, and they will have disappointment and frustration when they're kids and when they're adults. So if they don't experience it, they will not learn how to push through to the other side. So avoidance of situations just to try to protect, I don't think is useful in a lot of ways. Of course, you're going to protect your kid from certain situations and based on their age, what they can handle. But to completely avoid and say, I never want them to have a bad feeling, they're not going to learn how to survive in the real world.
Here's empathetic Joe. Empathetic Joe understands that when you see your child struggling, you want to swoop in and rescue them. You want them to feel better. No one wants their kids to feel bad and wallow in negative emotions. Real world Joe has a different opinion in that those negative emotions foster growth in that child. Friction is where they grow. That's where they learn to manage and deal with tough situations. And so while we don't want it to happen, completely agree, I do think it is a learning experience, and you get to be there as a parent, as their safety net during that learning experience before they go in the real world and they deal with some adversity and they don't have you as a safety net. So it's better to deal with now.
I certainly did not mean that they would have a negative experience and then have to just deal with it on their own. As a parent, you need to guide them through it, role model how to handle it, and then hopefully they will over time learn how to do it on their own.
Number 3, parenting trends that absolutely need to stop. Fake gentle parenting. Now, I'm going to read the paragraph underneath that is supporting that statement. I just want to make sure you're on the same page with me.
Okay.
That this is supporting why they think this needs to stop. You hear and see so many parents letting their children do whatever they want, no matter how destructive, rude, or hurtful their behaviors are. Parents find themselves beholden to the whims of their children, emotions in the name of gentle parenting instead of true gentle parenting, where boundaries are set alongside validating emotions.
Okay, the word that comes to mind is, this might be harsh, but it almost sounds like they're lazy. Like they don't want to have to parent, so they just call it gentle parenting so that...
It's similar to that first one, like a not parenting and calling it parenting. Yes, I would just reemphasize that understanding time and place is important. And so there's a dichotomy here, and this is important for people, for parents to understand, kids to understand. So I want my kid to be who they are all the time. Okay, if they're a jerk, you need to rein that in certain situations. They don't know they're being a jerk, but you need to teach them. That's why you're the parent. So again, I'll use my grocery store example. If they're going around and knocking things off the shelf, that forces another worker to come and clean up after your child out in a public space. And you say, I let them explore the room. Yeah, you can do that at home, but now you're affecting someone else's life. And that's where I think I draw the line.
I just don't get I don't get the end goal of that. People don't see where that's going to end up being a problem? Like they're going to go into a workspace and just not have to follow any rules?
I don't mind a lot of gentle parenting techniques. Our parenting technique we talk about all the time is constant gentle pressure, but it is still pressure, even though it's constant and it's gentle. It is still pushing them in a direction that will serve them long term.
And kids will, from when they're little, they will push the boundary because they want to see how far they can go. So if the boundary's never set, they will not set it for themselves, and they're going to get themselves into, I would imagine, a world of trouble at school too, if boundaries aren't set. And they don't have to be harsh or mean. They're just, hey, this is too far. Just like when you teach a kid to not put their hand over the stove. That's the boundary. Like they try to push the limit, they could learn the hard way, but you still set the boundary.
Speaking of boundaries, number 4, parenting trends that absolutely need to stop: not setting clear boundaries. I agree. This is going to stress you out more than anything else, that if you leave everything ambiguous so the child learns that everything's negotiable and that the more they whine, the more they get, that's going to stress you out as a parent. That's going to stress the child out for both your benefits. Set some boundaries when appropriate.
Definitely.
Number 5, the bulldozer parent. Now, I only heard about this when I started teaching school, but a bulldozer parent was essentially a parent that goes in front of the child and tries to push all obstacles out of the way. Again, I'm going to show a little bit of empathy here. Is I understand why you're doing it. You're trying to set your child up for success, and you don't want to see him or her struggle, and that's reasonable. Like, you want people to be successful. Just the method of trying to push all obstacles out of the way, I think, does more harm than good. So while people can have a good heart, I know you've been the ruthless one today, and I've been the kind-hearted one. The heart's in the right place. Get it. Okay. Acknowledged, and now let's see what the outcomes of doing that is. And you have a child that can't overcome adversity and problems themselves, and not only that, you burn a lot of bridges. If you're always in there schooling teachers and calling universities to make sure that they have their exact accommodations you want your child to want, all these bulldozer parent techniques, heart's in the right place was going to do more harm than good.
You know, what occurs to me here, and this is a therapy thing that when I was a counselor for a couple of years, a parent, if they're willing, should self-reflect. When they were younger, what would have helped them if their parents did? What could their parents have done for them that would have helped them? And sometimes I think people who become bulldozer parents, maybe they're trying to make up for something that they didn't get when they were younger. So I think it's really important to look back. What would have been helpful to you, like seriously helpful to you, that helped you then become an adult, and then do that for your child. And this also connects with the not having any negative experiences one. If you bulldoze it all out of the way, your child will never learn how to deal with adversity. And here we really try to progress our children to become confident. How are you going to gain confidence when you just solve all the problems for them?
Number 6, stage mom syndrome. It could certainly be stage dad syndrome too. And what the person wrote is abusing the talents of your child just to boost your own self-image in society. This is one of my pet peeves. But to be sympathetic, Joe.
I like this side of you.
I was empathetic. This is going to be sympathetic.
Oh, I'll wait and see then.
Yeah, it's a little different. It's a little different version. Is that I am fine with like you sharing pictures of what your family's up to with your family, so everyone's in the loop. I think that's different. However, what this person's saying, I see, look at my child, they're so brave doing this thing. And like the mom or dad are constantly posting it for their own self-image, their own likes, their own dopamine release, their own feel goods. And your child becomes a prop in your life. And I hate that. And that makes my blood boil. It's a fine line though between, hey, here's what my family's up to, making sure people are in the loop, because we used to just send those like Christmas cards and 2 pages of typing on exactly what a family's up to. That doesn't really exist anymore. I guess it comes down to intent for me. If you're using that image as an intent to raise the child as a prop to get credit for your life, that stinks.
Here's an example of something I've done. So instead of posting on Facebook, which I do very little of, I will simply send the picture of my kid to the particular people I want to have to see it. Like grandparents. Since we moved across the country, we're not in person as much. So I try to handpick who do I want to send this to versus just putting it on social media, which oftentimes, I don't know, it's more just for likes or like a prop, like you said. So maybe just being more intentional. What's the end game here? Why post it there when you could just deliberately give it to the person who you really want to have see it? I think that's more intentional.
Number 7, I don't want to talk about that much. Just says nonstop supervision. It goes along with a lot of the other things we mentioned. Yes, the kids need some room to grow and play. Number 8 is one that I take a little bit of, maybe I don't agree with this one. And number 8 of parenting, whatever they say, parenting whatever they want to stop. Parenting techniques that they absolutely want to stop. Not believing the teacher. My kid never lies to me. Seriously, parents absolutely should be their kid's biggest supporter, but support sometimes means holding the kid responsible when they don't do the right thing. I guarantee the person that wrote that's a teacher. Guarantee. And as a former teacher, I understand that. As I've had parents call me because there's a misunderstanding with assignments. And they're a little bit fired up, and then I explain it to them, and they end up being fine. Sometimes the teachers are full of crap. Sometimes your kids are full of crap. And you got to get to the bottom of it in every situation. So not believing the teacher, I tend to give teachers the benefit of the doubt. There's been a couple instances in our kids' lives where the teacher was incorrect and we discussed it. And in this case, she realized that things weren't exactly right or how she viewed it, and then it worked out. There's been instances the teacher is absolutely right. Honestly, trying to hold back to protect us, trying to make the kid look good. You know what? They need to be accountable for their actions in those situations. So I don't think it's always or one or the other way. I think the parents need to be critical of the situation, analyze it, and make the right judgment, because sometimes the parents are wrong, sometimes the kids are wrong, sometimes the teachers are wrong, and assuming one way or the other is not for me.
Yes, that was the word that came to mind, was assumptions. If a kid comes home with an issue from school, we will ask them, help me understand what happened here. We do follow up with the teacher as well. Of course, we want to believe our child, but I think it's important to show them that you still need to, you said it perfectly, you still need to analyze the situation, and then make a judgment based on all the information. Not just assume your kid is right and then fight and maybe figure out. Actually, that ends up, if you assume that they're right all the time, I think the kid will pick up on that. And what if they start to use that as a manipulation? I think that could happen. So we try to teach our kids to hear out all sides of the story and then understand it and make a decision as like a learning opportunity, not punitive.
All right, I'm going to skip a couple. Let's try and do them all, but some of them are just not good. Or that we've already discussed them. They're very repetitive. This one's no talking back, and the person wrote like 3 paragraphs about it. Just saying the words, no, don't talk back to me. I agree, isn't great. But again, there's going to be a time and place. If it's an emergency situation and you are giving commands, not the time for the kid to get all sassy. Like, here's where we need to go. And then you give them okay, I'll hear you out when this is over. And I don't know. I think this person's being too sensitive. Helicopter parenting, we covered it with bulldozer parenting. It's just one level back. Pushing them too hard is something that needs to stop. Pushing them too hard in sports, academics, etc. Like pushing them till they need therapy and get injured. No free time, no downtime. FFS, which is, I guess, cuss words in internet word. They only get to be young without excessive responsibilities once. Disagree with this person. Because their perception of pushing them hard might be someone else's perception of educating and teaching them. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine has a morning routine with the kids. Kids get up, they do some reading, they do some exercise together. People comment on that post, quit pushing your kids so hard. Let them be kids. I don't know, like the kids genuinely enjoy it. Our kids worked out with this morning, and we have some general growth during it. So I agree with not having them like militaristic schedule and pushing them on that level. Completely agree. However, someone else's interpretation of a high-functioning family might be, oh, they push them too hard because they make them do chores. And I'm sick of that crap. There has to be some standard. And so it's going to be somewhere in the middle. Thoughts?
I think a lot of it is mindset. We don't consider chores pushing them to work. We consider it contributing to the family. You bring value to the family. And I think that's, maybe it's just maybe it's a matter of mindset shifting, where if you see it as work, if you see it as chores, then I think you're just looking at it the wrong way. It's a contribution. And then in the morning routine, yeah, our kids, I'd much rather our kids do what we have them do, the process we have where they help with a contribution in the kitchen, they write their journal, then if they finish everything, they can have a time on their tech time. And I think that they really appreciate that morning routine, because what's the alternative? Roll out of bed and then just eat something and then go on your tech time? Like, that doesn't sound better to me. If I just said, I'm letting them be a kid, to me, it sounds like I'm letting them be a slacker and not learn how to progress. Because again, they're not going to wake up one day and just know how to do those things.
Yeah, it comes down to you being an intelligent person and knowing the difference between driving them towards something that you want and coaching them towards something that they want. But it's not easy to get things in the world. So you kind of have to teach them and support them and give them, in our interpretation, constant gentle pressure to get there. The next one, kids on social media. Yeah, I agree. I don't like kids on social media. It says creating social media channels for your children where they proceed to upload videos, dance videos, photos. Perfect place for pedophiles. Yeah, probably. Yes to that. And yeah, I think there's a lot of mental health issues with children because they're searching for those likes in this fake world, and they're not getting necessarily the skills in the real world. So
this is the one that makes my skin crawl. I'm a huge proponent of having relationships in person. And maybe I'm a little too extreme, but one of our kids, they're in a robotics group, and they do have this social media thing called Sports U where they communicate about practices and whatever. And I don't even let them go on that, because I'm like, have the conversation in person. And if something pops up or we have to comment on something because it's like a scheduling thing, I talk to them about it and we do that. But I just think even that habit of speaking on the computer versus speaking to someone's face, I just think as soon as you start that, it already affects their ability to be socially mature.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day where someone had allowed their kids on social media, and now they're like, wow, I really regret doing that. And it's much harder to stop doing something that you allow. And that's true in a lot of different ways, life, business. Once you allow something, it's much harder psychologically for that person who you allowed to do it when you take it back. And now they don't have it. It's better not give it at all, and they're better off not having it at all than try to give something and take it back. I know some of us get in that situation. You have to work through it. However, that does exist. All right. This one is repetitive to an earlier one, too much structure. I know, it's your own interpretation. Usually people say, oh, just let the kids go. This person is saying, hey, just let the kids go outside and play with their friends.
Well,
okay, have some.
But like you said, time and place, right?
Yeah.
There's times of the day that require structure. There's times of the day that don't. So I think that's really just a balancing act. But if you're extreme, everything is structured, then that probably is too much. Although some people do great with structure. You might have to balance it out based on your child as well.
Yeah, they have a couple on tablet addiction, tablet in public. Not a huge fan of it, but I'm also not going to judge a parent who's just had a wild day. And if that they've like I just said earlier, like it's tougher to take something back once you've given it, and maybe they regret giving the child a tablet, but now the kid, that's how they play games in the grocery store. Like, I'm not going to judge the person because of it if they're working on reducing it and teaching them other ways to entertain themselves. Let me get to the next one though, Mel, because I know we can have a whole episode on tablets and phones.
I know. I keep wanting to talk more about that.
Time. All right. Here's one that I don't necessarily agree with. Most of them I do generally agree. Silence. Saying what goes on in this house stays in this house. Now this person is speaking from, I know hundreds of victims of abuse go through pain because of this phrase. I think In the example of abuse, yeah, you should absolutely be comfortable saying something.
Of course, yeah.
And you don't follow that. I think your family can have its own sayings, its own culture, its own mottos, its own discussions on hot topics out there, on what the parents think and what the kids think. And they don't necessarily have to go talking about it all the time.
I think this goes back to boundary setting. So we certainly speak on certain topics at home. Maybe we use certain phrases that we might not think that should be repeated in other places just because it's our own family culture. People might not understand it. So it's a matter of teaching the kids boundaries. And sometimes we simply say, hey, this conversation is really an at-home conversation. This needs to stay between us. But it's never something like someone is being unsafe.
Correct. So I guess it's the situation, how this person has interpreted it. Yes, I agree. If something's unsafe, you should absolutely feel comfortable saying something. I don't think, and you've worked as a social worker, I don't know if that saying is what.
That saying makes me think about abusive situations. I'll think that I would never say to my kid, what we say in this house stays in this house. Like that already has a negative connotation. We more have a discussion. We try to help them understand that this is better kept within our family boundaries. So I think that phrase is very charged in a negative way.
Couple left. This person gets all fired up about birthdays, but so do I. So let's take a quick read. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Social media trend that keeps upping the expectations for birthday parties and any celebration connected with a kid. When I was a kid, birthdays consisted of a handmade invitation made by me, a cake from the grocery store, food that my mom cooked, and then inviting some family and friends over for games. Today's expectation is that every month-versary or half birthday consists of a huge arc of balloons that will end up in the trash, a customized 3-tier fondant cake, gift wrapping.
Oh my goodness.
This person has got fired about birthdays.
Okay, but
themed parties with very intentional outfit choices for the numerous photo ops. Anything for the gram, right? Don't get me started on gender reveal announcements. Okay. I am anti-birthday, but if you want to throw a wild one for your kid, knock yourself out. I think it goes back to the intention up front. If it's for you and your family to make a great memory, go wild. Light up fireworks, get dressed up in silly outfits, get your balloon arc, I don't know, blow something up, whatever your family's into. However, it's the intent for me. If that's for you and your family to enjoy, great. If it's for you to show off to your friends, then not so cool.
And I also think it does depend on what your family values. We drove by this park last weekend and there was a birthday party going on. And I think this kind of started during COVID where people couldn't get together. So they would buy these big signs saying happy birthday, Ava or whatever. And they'd put it on their front yard. And my first thought was, yes, I think it's important to celebrate people. But I just don't understand them spending money on that. But it really depends on what you value. If that's valuable to you, if you find that that's the way that you want to celebrate, that's fine. But it also sets up an expectation. We've always done just at-home parties where a couple of kids come over. I always feel like if I start letting them have a party like out at a place, it's just going to set the expectation every year. And they end up having a blast just here with their friends.
Correct. Last one we're going to do. I think this one's worded a little weird, but it says, you're not special. Perpetuating the myth that one's children are somehow special, with about 97% certainty they are not. Well, the person's making up statistics. Teaching them that they are just sets them up for crushing disappointment down the road. It's far better to raise kids to believe they are ordinary people with a few gifts, but some flaws and weaknesses.
Maybe this is semantics, but one of our values is be genuine. And maybe another way you could say that is you're special. But I think it's more being who you are, acknowledging what your talents are, and really using them to make good to put good into the world. I get what they're saying. They're trying to make it sound like you're somehow on a pedestal, maybe.
Yeah, I think a lot of these sayings are just overblown. Like I was talking about earlier with morning routines. Don't say your kids are special. Don't be your kids' friends. Like these are like just dumb things to get past because sometimes you are your kids' friends. Sometimes you need to be the parent. Sometimes they need to know that they are unique. And sometimes they need to know that they are fallible. Here's where I draw the line on this one. I do believe everyone has special talents. I do believe most people don't ever reach them because they don't have high standards for themselves and they're not taught well. And so you do have unique values and talents. However, it's your responsibility to live up to that standard during your life, that you can give those out and show those better to the world. It's old Damon Johnson, first you have to make it, then you can matter. I think people are trying to matter before they ever make it. And that kind of, oh, you're a special, unique person. Oh, yes, you are. Your DNA is technically different. So this person's making up their 97% number. I can say with 100% certainty that everyone is slightly special if you look in their way. But by the way they're talking in cultural standards, you are as special as you can live up to in your life, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think one of our tasks as parents is to help our children figure out what is special about them, what is unique about them, and help them to be that genuine person. That makes a lot of sense. So I think a lot of it is how you interpret that word, but we really need to just not let it go off to not let it just be, the kid will just figure it out eventually. I think we need to provide a little more strategy and direction and structure around helping your kids figure it out.
Here's my last thought, and then Mel, I'll pass it over to you for the final words. We hear a lot of these trends, and that's why we wanted to go through this article with you live. This is Mel's first time hearing them, and I just skimmed them to get the general feedback. You're going to hear these things in the world. You're going to hear the parenting nut friend. You're going to hear bulldozer. You're going to hear helicopter parenting. And I think that pigeonholes us into one way of living. And so in my interpretation is that I want you to be intelligent enough to decide when it is appropriate to hold the standards and when it is appropriate to let them be a kid. When is it appropriate to believe the teacher, and when is it appropriate to hear your child out and build trust with them? When is it appropriate to have some things in your household that are uniquely yours, or then things that you share with the world? When is it appropriate to tell them that they are unique and gifted? And when is it appropriate to push them so that those unique gifts do actually come to fruition? And so there's a dichotomy to all this, and most people will marry themselves to a statement and just say it over and over again, and it screws up their parenting, especially that when I'm not their friend, I'm their parent. I hear that over and over again, and it depends on the situation. Sometimes they need a friend, sometimes they need a parent, and I want everyone to be intelligent enough to apply the right tool to the right situation. I don't want you to open up your toolbox of parenting and see only hammers, and that's what you use. Like, there are lots of tools, and we want to teach you those tools, and there is a time and place for each.
Yeah, I agree with that very much. I think also sometimes these kind of phrases like I'm a bulldozer parent or helicopter parent or whatever, we are not just one thing. Like you said, you can't just open your toolbox and have one tool. You need to have a variety. And what I want to add to what you said is sometimes each of your children will require a different style of parenting. And also throughout, that might change as they grow. The way you are when they're a baby, the way you are when they are a teenager, and just based on their personality. We see this with our kids. We have to employ different tools for different children in different situations. So I think it's a matter of growing the skills, having multiple tools in that toolbox, and using them and not just relying on whichever one is most comfortable or whichever one is easiest or whatever.
If this episode made you think, please do visit your favorite podcast platform and give a written comment if you're serious, or just a 5-star review if you're testing the waters. You can find more of our material over at strongfamilyproject.com. Thank you for listening to another episode, and talk to you on the next one.